Hi, I'm Jim Rice. We build airplanes.
We build airplanes. We build airplanes.
I think you have to take risks. If you don't take a risk, nothing happens. And the main thing is getting over the fear of failure and not realizing, not thinking that failure is disastrous. I mean, you've got to try something and learn from it. I certainly think from a purely commercial standpoint that you certainly need to find a need and fill it. I mean, there's no question about that. I don't know how it would be successful unless there were not some kind of express need for something. I didn't know a thing about building airplanes. When I went home and told my wife, Glenda, that I was going to start an airplane company, the first thing she said, it hurt a little bit, you can't even fix a doorknob on her front door. How are you going to build an airplane? So it was not a natural thing for me to do, but I'd learned marketing in the furniture industry. It's a niche marketing business. And here I was starting to see a big void, not just a niche, in a certain price and size and comfort of airplanes.
What do you do when you feel the fear, that's real fear?
I go to the Bible, I really do, and I just, I've got different books with different Bible passages in it, some that say when you have fear, and you read them, and it's amazing what happens and how the Lord leads you to something else, and you realize that, somehow or another, if things don't work just exactly right, you still got the Lord, He's still there, He's still your Father, and things will be okay, and it sort of helps you get over your personal fear.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, welcome. A genuine welcome to you for joining us on a course called Vision of the Leader. Well, look at the set behind me. It's rather unusual and striking, don't you think? And you may be wondering, what's that logo in the back there, that E with the 10 on it? Well, this is a part of a very unusual series called the Exponential Leadership Series. You may have heard that word or maybe never did. Just think about back in algebra, if you ever had that, where you'd have, let's say, the number 5 to the 5th power. There's addition 5 plus 5, and multiplication 5 times 5. And then there's exponential growth, which is 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. Well, this is E, standing for exponential, meaning rapid growth to the 10th power. Because I believe that there are secrets that are right before us that many times we miss, that control growth, that's not addition or multiplication, but it's a ramp just like that is almost incredible and difficult to believe it's actually possible. And that's what we're going to be talking about in this whole series, and the series that follow this. This is the first one, and it deals with vision, or how you see things. And we're going to focus your vision on your vision. That is, what are you trying to do? This person believes you preach the Bible, but you should have a compelling vision of where you believe God wants you to go. And that vision becomes a North Star of everything that you're trying to do and everything you're trying to become. And that leader then gets the people behind them to buy into that vision, and they all, instead of becoming individuals going in every direction, they all become one person moving in that direction. Now I want to ask you a question. Let's say they both begin with 100 people, and 10 years pass, and you come back. How many people do you think will be in this church that has the compelling vision? And how many people do you think will be in this church, the twin brother, who doesn't have a compelling vision? So take out your course workbook and the vision of the leader, and just somewhere on the inside cover, write down 2 numbers. Number 1, how many people with the man who didn't have a vision? And number 2, how many people, after 10 years, if you started with 100, they would have the person who has a vision? And then I'll tell you what the average has been all over the world. It's rather dramatic. So make sure you have those two numbers down. All right, let's see what you had. For the first person who doesn't have a vision, and you come back in 10 years, how many say it's going to be around the same attendance? Well, it's more than half the people. How many say between 100 and 200? How many say more than 200? Well, basically, it looks like it's about 150 after 10 years' work. Let's come over to the other side. His twin brother started with 100 people, preached the same messages, maybe even borrowed his brother's outlines. How many people would you have at that church? How many say it'd be about the same? Nobody. How about 100 to 200? No one. What about 200 to 500? No one. How about one person? How about 500 to 999? It's about a quarter of the audience. How about 1,000 to 1,500? 1,500 to 2,000? More than 2,000. Look at the numbers that are here. Just see what we've done. We've just changed one objective, that's all. Everything else is the same. And all that's different is something that's clear in the person's heart. They have a vision that they want to accomplish. Now, when you think about a vision, it's what you see. Sometimes people are blind. Sometimes they put a cover over their heads and they can't see. Sometimes it's blurred, and no matter what they look, they can't see it, and they go in this direction, and then they go in this direction. This course is meant to be a pair of glasses. Just put it on and say, ho, 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 ho. That's what it is. I didn't see clearly, but now I see. Vision. Now, when you think about this, you can have vision for the next step. And that's all the vision you have. But you don't know where you're going. So if you want to walk here, you could walk here. Because you don't have a vision. You can have vision right out here, kind of a little bit. You can have a vision that's even further out here. Or you could even go way down the road and look at the vision you want to accomplish and then walk all the way out to the finish line and turn around. And look what it looks like from the end of your vision when it's done and look back. That's called the future perfect. What will have been the right vision for you? There's another kind of vision, and that's a spiritual vision. That's when you project yourself not out 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, but let's go out 500 years from now, when you're in heaven and you've been there for a few centuries and you really have a sense of perspective about your life on earth. What will your vision, how will you view your vision back, looking back in your life today? If you were to put 100 people, 100 leaders in a row right here, from all over the world, just your average leader right here, how many of them do you think would be a visionary leader of the 100? How many do you think? Write a number down. How many of the 100 do you think would have a vision? All right, let's see what you had. How many say 90 to 100 have a vision? 80 to 90, 70 to 80, 60 to 50, 40 to 50, 30 to 40, 20 to 30, 10 to 20, 5 to 10, less than 5%. Well, around the world, do you know what the average is? 5%. That means 95% of the people who are leader can't see where they're going. It's not that they don't want to see, but just they've decided God didn't make me a visionary leader, and I just don't have what the other people have. But now think about it from God's point of view for a moment. If you were God and you wanted these churches to grow, why would you only give 5% of the people the ability to have a vision if you could have 10 times more the result with the vision? Or could it be that somewhere along the lives of those 95 people who lead, the ability to vision and to see clearly where they're going and to have a fire in their belly about reaching that vision has been pushed down or killed or destroyed by somebody else, or failure? They thought they had a vision and it didn't work, and they kind of gave up in having a vision. Well, that's what this course is all about. that no matter what has happened to you, and no matter whether or not you'd identify with the 5 or the 95, by the end of this course, by God's grace and through a lot of challenging thoughts on your part, you're going to have a clear and compelling vision about why God has left you on this earth and what He wants you to achieve. And it should be something that when you get up in the morning, you are excited about. Today, 5 years from now, and 10 years from now, you're even more thrilled about accomplishing that vision. But this course then is going to see, what can we do? How do we practically get a handle on how vision actually takes place? There are 4 sessions that we're going to deal with. Session 1 is the birth of the vision. How does vision actually begin in a person? Session number 2 is the power to do the vision. How do you get the power to do a vision when you first start? Seems absolutely impossible to do. Session number 3 has to do with the validation of the vision. How do you make sure that the vision that you have isn't something that you just dreamt up one day, or maybe after having a burrito, you had this wild dream at night, woke up the next morning and wrote it down and said, you know, that's the vision that I'm going to have. How do you know that the vision is from God and not something that you invented? Wouldn't it be wonderful if there could be a practical, objective method to do that? So at the end of these tests, to make sure that the validation of your vision is clear, and there's all these green lights in a row, you could say, you know, this is from God, and this is exactly what I'm supposed to do, and I won't be double-minded anymore. Amen. The last one is called the tests of the vision. These are those parts in the accomplishment of the vision where the vision dies. It's kind of the graveyard of visions, because the tests come and they're difficult and they're hard, and people give up, or they don't anticipate them, or they don't know how to understand them. And we're going to give you the 7 primary tests of every single vision. What to expect, what the biblical answer is, and how to approach it. And many of you, if not all of you, are going to say, oh, I'm right in that test, right this moment. Now I finally understand. But let's get started into session number 1, and take in your workbooks, and let's go to birth. We're going to take our survey from the book of Nehemiah and just trace through what took place in his life. Nehemiah chapter 1, verse number 1. The words of Nehemiah, the sons of Hakaliah. And it came to pass in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan the citadel, that Hananiah, one of my brethren, came with men from Judah. And I asked them something. I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the survivors who are left from the captivity in the province are there in great distress and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem is also broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. Do you realize what he did? It's rather simple, but he asked the person about the situation and about their need. And that's point number 1, because every single vision from God is based upon somebody else's needs. If it's based upon your need as a leader to have a vision, because people expect you to have a vision, and I desperately need a vision, and I'm going to have a vision so I know where to go, you'll have the wrong vision. Vision from God is always based upon someone else's need. And what a vision is a picture. It's a picture of the need met, that it's finished. You see, vision isn't just a general statement. Vision is a picture. It's a picture in your mind that hasn't come true yet. It's a picture of something that has not happened yet. And it's a picture of the need that you are seeking to meet in the lives of people when it's finished. And what Nehemiah did is he asked the people, tell me about what's going on. And he listened. And my question to you as we get into point number 1, which is the investigative seeking for the need. Most visions that really come over time either happen to you, that is, you run smack into a major need of someone and it attracts you and you are impelled and compelled to begin to do something, or you are a person like Nehemiah who really begins to ask for the needs of other people. All great leaders are people who seek the needs of other people and then seek to meet it. And throughout this course, we're going to deal with two different types of kind of visions. One is a short-term one, and one is a long-term one. For instance, a short-term one is when you meet with somebody and you ask them a couple questions and you're seeking to try and find out what's the need in the person right this minute, raise it up so that you can get a vision in your mind about how to meet that need. Yesterday I flew back from Houston, and last night about 11:30, Darlene and I were talking about two of our friends who have huge needs right now, major needs. And we were talking about what can we do to meet their need and how we're going to change our schedule in our life to meet those needs. Well, what is that? That's a vision of a need. And I find if you don't watch out, you'll stop asking people about their needs. And you'll just kind of do your leading and from the back of your desk. And you lose track of people's needs. Like, I don't want to know your need. I was at a pastor's conference one, and a pastor came up to me and said, I'm having trouble with my church. It just won't go. It's kind of flat. And he said, could you have a cup of coffee with me and talk to me about that? I said, sure. So I said, tell me about your church. He says, well, it's kind of going down a little bit. And I said, do you know whose fault that is? He said, what do you mean? So who's in charge of the church? Well, who's the pastor of the church? Well, I'm the pastor of the church. Well, how is the church doing? Is the church growing or is the church going down? He said, well, the church is going down. I said, well, I've got to start with the real question. Whose fault is that? Did the people want it to go down? Does God want it to go down? Do you want it to go down? It's your job to make sure that it doesn't. So he got back to it, got kind of quiet for a moment, and I said to him, what are you preaching about? He says, I'm preaching the book of Galatians. I said, that's tremendous. How long have you been preaching Galatians? I've been preaching Galatians for about 2.5 years. I said, well, that's wonderful. He says, yes, I'm finally going in depth into the book of Galatians. And I'm really getting into the Greek and getting into just stuff you get at seminary. I'm loving it. I said, I wonder if the people are loving it. I says, what is the big idea of Galatians? He said, the big idea of Galatians is that you're not saved by works. I said, right. How many people in your church believe they're saved by works? Well, none of them believe they're saved by works. I said, well, then why are you spending 2.5 years telling them something they don't need? He says, well, I'm doing that because I've always wanted to preach through Galatians. I said, well, now wait a minute. Think about what you're just saying. You're saying that the need is in you to preach something versus the need in the people. Remember, a vision is based upon the need of other people, and it's a picture of the need met. So I said to him, if you really want to find out how you're doing, preach a little bit next Sunday and give out a blank questionnaire, anonymous one, and say to the people, I'm planning my preaching calendar, and would you please just write down the answers to these questions without your name on it. Like, when I get depressed, it's usually because when I have a fight with my spouse, it's usually over. If I could change just one thing in my life, it would be, I get most frustrated with my children when and I gave them 10 questions just like that. I said, take those sheets of paper, go back the afternoon and spread them out on a piece of paper, on a big desk, and begin to tabulate them and then call me up in the afternoon. Well, he did. And he had a totally different tone of voice. I said, what did you find out? He said, I had no idea there was such dramatic needs in my church. I said, that's right. And how many of those needs were met by Galatians? He said, none. I said, no wonder people are leaving, because your job is to meet the needs of the people through God's Word. Now my point to you is, what's the need you're trying to meet? And whether or not you are good at coming to somebody and asking a couple questions and raising the need, because that's the goal, investigating the need. Point number 2, just because you find the need doesn't mean that's going to work for the basis of a vision. Point number 2, take a look at Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 4a. So it was when I heard these words that I sat down and I wept. Now, you know what he could have said? He could have said, I'm sorry that you feel this way. I'm sorry that you're having a difficult time, and I'll pray for you. But instead, he says, I sat down and I wept. And point number 2 is the intentional sympathy with those in need. Now, what do I mean by that? That's where you take the person right here who has this need that exists in them, and you ask questions until you open up their heart, and then you open up your heart, and you take their need, and you bring it out of them, and you bring it over into you. Sympathy means to feel with. Not I see, but I feel with. And for Nehemiah to sit down and to weep shows his purposefulness of seeking to get in touch with the person's need. Now, what about you? What is in your heart? What is the pain in your heart about the need you're trying to solve? And how many times do you open up other people's hearts to get your heart in touch with their heart so it's inside of you? I was talking to a woman. I had to speak to a group of women who used to be married are now divorced and have children at home and had to work full time. And I didn't have that in my heart. And so I was with a couple of these ladies beforehand, and I began to ask questions about what is your day like and how do you feel when you come home when there's no husband and there's not enough money and there's too much going on and you didn't have enough money for your kids to be babysat during the day and you don't know what they did and you have to get 2 jobs because your child needs braces. What's going on? And as these ladies shared and shared, overwhelming pain until I was just weeping. I did that on purpose. You need to do it on purpose. It's an intentional sympathy with the need. The third part of this has to do with something rather surprising. Take a look at Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 4, the second half of it. It says, and he mourned for many days. He mourned for many days. Now, what happened here? You can meet somebody and you can get the need and not even get it inside of you. You can get it inside of you so you can minister more effectively. But the next question is, should you do something about it beyond that? This is very important. When you walk away from that situation, the question you want to ask yourself is, does that need stick to my back when I leave? Not that you tried to make it stick. Did it stick to you? That's called the bonding. That's point number 3, the bonding of the need to you. The instinctive bonding to the need. This isn't something that you do. This happens to you. That is, when you leave, you can't stop thinking about it. You can't stop praying about it. And if you're married, you can't stop talking about it with your spouse until sometimes they say, don't tell me any more about this problem. And you're talking about it with God because it stuck to you. Why did it stick? Why? It stuck because there's a magnet in you. And that magnet attracts certain things to you where it doesn't attract anybody else around you to the same need as what yours attracts. When it attracts, it's a dead giveaway that this could be the groundwork, the soil out of which can become a major vision for your life. What happens to so many people is they see a problem and they want to try and identify with it and fix it when it didn't even stick to them. It wasn't meant to be something that they were supposed to do because God wired you with talents, with skills, with passions that are this huge magnet coming out here, just kind of and it need comes along and whew, that's what you need to pay attention to. Are you wired to meet that need? If you are, it'll stick to you in such a way you can't get it out of your mind. Which means, if it doesn't stick to you, let someone else do it. So many times, leaders are doing all these, quote, visions of other people who the problem stuck to their back and they didn't want to do it, so they came to you and said, don't you think we should do this? And out of a sense of obligation or false guilt, you pick it up and say, yeah, I guess so, and you start carrying somebody else's vision. If it doesn't stick to you, my friends, why are you doing it? Why does it stick? God gave you these strengths, these talents, and He gave them because He wanted you to use them to meet other people's needs with them. And whatever those are, that's where your vision must come from. It must come from that place. And if it does, it's going to come easy to you. It's going to become instinctive to you. People are going to say, boy, you're really good at that. And you're going to say, I almost don't even have to try about this. Why? God wired you to do that. If you're doing something that didn't bond to you, on the other hand, you're going to be so tired at the end of doing it, you're going to be sighing more times. And when you start to do something in 10 minutes, you're tireder versus something that bonded to you, then what begins to happen there is you are empowered and invigorated because of what takes place. Well, those are the first three of the birth of a vision. And I hope you're beginning to get the movement of how it's supposed to take place. This issue of the investigative seeking for the need, the intentional sympathy with the need, and the instinctive bonding to the need. Isn't it wonderful to realize that Almighty God has wired you to do an incredible vision? It's those things that just make your heart grow warm and it motivates you. That is the ground out of which God will build and grow a tremendous vision for you, a sense of destiny in your life that brings you great satisfaction and fulfillment. And when you go to bed at night and your head hits that pillow, you say, you know, my life really means something. Well, look forward to the next part, the second half of the birth of the vision, when I share with you the most strategic moment in what makes a vision becomes God-size and even supernatural.
Coming up next, session questions. But first, enjoy these gifts from Teach Every Nation. Just visit the link below to obtain your free downloads.
What's been the biggest challenge looking back over all these years that you've had to face as the leader?
When I started the company, I was saved at that time, and I started it with the premise that this would be a God-honoring company. And God has tested that.
Do you hire all Christians?
No, we have an open door policy. One of the programs I had with my company was to make it somewhat evangelistic as well. We're open to all.
Mm-hmm.